Hi, it's Simon Baker here. And before we get into today's podcast, I'd like to talk to you about Fusion 4 Ventures. Fusion 4 Ventures helps prop tech companies around the world to rapidly scale their businesses with a view to exiting. I'm a partner at Fusion 4 Ventures, and how we do it is simple. We take a hands-on approach and work with management to help them find ways to scale revenues through acquisitions or through organic growth. And we then help them find the right exit partner. If you're interested in finding out more, contact me at simon@fusion4.ventures.
A 40% increase in user engagement. That is what our sponsor PropTechs reckon that they can do for your real estate website. Now, obviously, we don't own a real estate website, so we can't check. But the fact that they have some really big clients like the likes of ImmoScout24 tells us that it can't all be lies. If that sounds good, head to proptechs.com or hit the guys up on LinkedIn and say that we sent you. And now, on with the news roundup. Hello and welcome to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. I'm joined by Harvey and Simon today. We have a news roundup. How are you doing, gents?
Very good. Thank you, Ed. Good to be back for another news roundup.
Very well, and this incredibly sort of almost wintry, rainy day in this part of the world.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll kick off the news roundup with very easily the biggest piece of news in our industry, I'd probably say over the last few months. This is the ongoing clear cooperation policy battle in the United States. There's been a big development here, which is actually kind of relevant and interesting, kind of outside the States. Harvey, why don't you fill us in of what's been happening up to this point and what's happened in the last few days?
Yeah, sure. As you say, it's a bit of a biggie, so I'm going to assume a little bit of knowledge on part of the listener, but for a quick potted history. So, National Association of Realtors has its own clear cooperation policy in the United States, whereby any brokerage or whatever is uploading or marketing a listing needs to upload it to the MLS within 24 hours. Now, this has been a rule in place for about 3 or 4 years, and it's become more and more controversial. Now, the rumor was that CCP was actually going to get rolled back entirely, but that would have been a little bit too radical, I think it is fair to say. It probably would have destabilized the market. So what the NAR has decided is that actually regional MLSs are going to have the right to put their own limits on when a marketed listing has to be made public on the MLS. Now, there are some businesses in the US, namely Zillow, that are highly reliant on a highly populated MLS. So what you have now is an MLS that realistically is going to have fewer listings on it, and we're going to have what is being called pocket listings, whereby they are invisible to the MLS. They're not on the MLS, and if they're not on the MLS, they can't go onto Zillow's site. So what's Zillow going to do about it? Well, Zillow has basically decided, we are the MLS. We are the biggest portal in the US. And if you don't upload your listings to the MLS within 24 hours, same as before the CCP regulations were rolled back, you can't list on Zillow anymore. You're out. So this is pretty controversial, as you can imagine. It's been described as an outrageous power play by CoStar boss Andy Florence. And to be fair, he's right. This is a major power play, and it's going to be interesting to see how people react to it. If you need any more information, you know where to find me, Ed, but I'll hand back over to you and Simon.
Yeah, this is quite big news. I mean, there's obviously a lot of context to get your head around what's happening here, but essentially what we're talking about is Zillow using its power in the market to say, well, if you want to list privately, if you want to keep listings away from the public view, then you can't list on us. My reading of this is kind of different to a lot of opinions I've read online. I tend to think this is fair enough on Zillow's part. It is a power play, but it is probably also, to a certain extent, driven by the kind of ethics of what Zillow was founded on, this idea that you're turning the screen around and showing the user the whole market. I kind of think it's fair enough. Where do you land on this, Simon?
Okay, so we have to look at it through multiple lenses. if you're a consumer, someone looking to buy a house, you want to see the whole market, and you want to know that going to Zillow or Homes or Realtor.com gives you that whole market perspective. And there's sort of an underlying belief system that I'm basically seeing the market when I go there. So I can understand that from a Zillow perspective, and I agree where you're coming from, they want to make sure that they can continue to provide that complete market picture to the consumer. Now, clearly, if they stop presenting that complete market picture to the consumer, then the consumers will start to look elsewhere, which means the traffic will go down. So it actually has a potential long-term impact on their business model. Not good for them. Now they want to, if they say nothing and then just keep taking the feeds as is, then they are potentially damaging their long-term model, right? Because they need to do that. Now, clearly, from the other perspective, a realtor may not, for whatever reason, want to put a listing onto the market. Maybe demand is quite high in their area, and they've already got a buyer lined up. So I just want to do the deal and move on. I don't want to share the commission, whatever. Right? Well, what's wrong with them doing that? Okay. What's wrong with them saying, you know what, I'd rather not upload to the MLS for a week because I think I can move the house? Why should I be bound by those rules? I should be allowed to conduct just as Zillow wants to conduct business their way, the realtor wants to be able to conduct business their way as well, right? His or her way. So I think you've got to understand that that it's just this market power. Well, I've got all the viewers. I'm going to tell you if you don't do this, therefore this is the outcome. Okay, that's your rules. That's fine. I don't think it. I think if I was going to not put it into the MLS for that 24 hours, and then Zillow goes, well, how do they know? By the way, it's not there for 24 hours. This is what I don't
Yeah, they
understand.
say
Right?
it was in a press release that they've developed some technology that lets them know these things.
Because I'm just wondering how would you do it, right? I sign an agreement with you as the salesperson, as the agent to sell my house. To go, no worries. I think I've got a number of buyers already in my Rolodex. There's an old term for anyone out under the age of about 40. A Rolodex used to be a way to store your business cards. What's a business card? Is probably the next question. That's that little piece of cardboard that we used to carry to say who we were and who we work for. Okay, and used to store them there and used to roll them down. So it was called a Rolodex. It went around on a reel. But if at the end of the day, an agent already has a potential buyer and wants time to go and negotiate with them without putting it to the general market, what's wrong with that? Right. And so I sort of agree with Andy Florence. Like, well, why is Zillow enforcing rules on the market on how the market should operate, when at the end of the day, the market should be a free market, right? It should be allowed to operate any which way it wants. Okay,
well,
so
and by that same token, though, saying the market should be allowed to operate any which way it wants, you're also saying Zillow can operate any which way it wants. I
yeah,
mean, the
Zillow,
kind of
Zillow should be able to do this. Zillow can do this, and no one's going to stop them. But I just don't think it's going to have the right outcome for them. My feeling is that if I have my list of potential buyers and I choose not to put it into the MLS for 2 weeks because I want to talk to all of them first, okay, will Zillow really want to piss me off as the real estate agent, who they're also then calling me on the other hand going, hey, by the way, Simon, would you like to buy a premium package from us? I'm going, well, wait a second, you're not advertising my listing because of your policy I don't agree with. So I think it's going to be one of these things that at the end of the day, they'll back down, because we have to all understand the following. There is a buyer and there is a seller. Everyone between those two are reliant on the fact that those two exist. Okay. If I've got a house and you're going to buy it from me, Ed, and we happen to know each other, I don't need a real estate agent. I don't need Zillow. I don't need Homes.com. I don't need any of those guys. We meet, we shake hands, we agree a price, go to the lawyer or whoever it is that does the contract. Done. I send money to you. I get your house.
Okay.
Easy.
All right.
So my
I
point is that everyone in that process exists because of the buyer and seller. If we are not serving the best interests of both parties at all times, then, if things don't go our way, we can't complain.
Okay. I know that controversy and disagreement is good for content, so I'm going to disagree. Think that actually Zillow is serving the best interests of the buyer by putting everything in one place and insisting it's there. I was kind of thinking of similar kind of situations that we've seen historically in the industry over the years, and the only one that I can really come up with is on the market's failed attempt to have what was called a one other portal rule, where basically they tried to put Zoopla out of business by saying you can list on us as a challenger and one other portal, i.e. Rightmove, right? That obviously went disastrously for them. I don't think this is going to go the same way. And I mean, this is, no one knows, right? I think it'd be interesting to come back in a year's time, review the situation and see if they've backed down or not.
It won't be a
I,
year. I reckon it's not going to be a year. I reckon this is going to be a tariff type thing, right? It'll be announced today and reversed tomorrow. Feeling that this is sort of like floating the balloon. We're going to do this, and they're going to see the results. And the reason Zillow exists, the reason it earns a lot of its income, is because of these real estate agents. If in that process you annoy them, so they think twice about spending money with you, no matter how many people you've got looking at your website, okay, they may just go, you know what, I'm not going to spend the money. So
I think
I've got a
some of the
feeling
agents aren't, and I think some of the agents are on side with this. Quite a lot of them are on side with this.
maybe they are.
Zillow doesn't need to sell to such a big volume of agents because of their business model. It's not like a homes.com where they need to sell to a lot of agents. They only need, because it's a commission share or mostly a commission share these days, they only need a few agents, right? They only need, they need to sell to 10% of the market to make good money.
Yeah. We will see how this pans out. Clearly we will, because we're going to be fantastically great observers of this. But I don't think it's going to be a year. I think we'll see. We'll either see. We probably will have a quiet back down. I've got a feeling what's going to happen is there'll be a big noise, but you'll see a lot of listings sort of slide through anyway and end up on Zillow, because they'll realize, in this, and it might be a market by market issue.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about how do they know, where something's been advertised. They haven't got people driving around looking at, has somebody put a for sale sign in the front yard,
No, clearly not.
Anyway, yeah, you're right. We will see. And because it's taking place in the US, we will definitely hear about it. We'll move on.
Yes.
Also, in the US, speaking of portals in the US, CoStar is apparently looking to light a fire under the growth of its flagship US real estate portal, homes.com. Harvey, why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, sure. Homes.com is CoStar's residential real estate portal. They were thinking about buying Realtor a few years back, decided, you know what, we're not going to bother. We'll do it in-house. And they bought it, and they have monetized it in the last 12 months or so. This relaunch has been sort of kind of quiet in terms of what money it's making. I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of talk about CoStar in the last 12 months, but not a whole lot about how homes.com is performing. I think, would anyone disagree with that so far?
I mean, they do release the numbers.
They release the numbers, but let's say that their comm strategy is not around homes.com being this like massive financial success so far. I think it's fair to say.
No, the comm strategy's been about the consumer side.
Exactly.
It's about
it's you're listing
building,
your lead.
Yeah, and I use a number of different US TV products like Hulu, etc., with a VPN, and I get a lot of homes.com ads. on there, right? I would say, yesterday I was watching something and there was, I must have seen 4 or 5 homes.com ads, and they're all about the user experience, the range of information you can access about a market, so you can make more intelligent, more informed decisions, and so on. And I think if you're going to build, if you think about how Zillow built their business, and I'm going back to, I remember when Zillow started. Okay, it was all done on the Zestimate. Okay, and what they basically said was, we want to help you, the consumer, have better data transparency to make a better decision. Same concept, just a different product. Okay, and what they did then was allow everyone in the United States to see the value of their home using the Zestimate model, and that then built a loyalty and a trust in the brand, and that's really what Homes.com is doing at the moment. Is they're building loyalty and trust in the Homes.com brand. They're using a very broad media strategy to do that. They're having some good success in that process. They'll claim that they are the number 2 portal in the market now. And whether they are or not is really not that relevant. They are now far more well known than they were historically from all the advertising. And they're focusing on building out a very good product with lots of data and information. So if that's where you're focusing and you want to have a clear strategy of communicating to the market, and most of your communications are the people to use the website, no one cares the numbers behind it. Zillow doesn't go out there and talk to everyone about the numbers behind it. They talk about their Zestimate or whatever. So that's why you're not hearing a lot about it, because it's not the focus of the conversation.
Absolutely. But there are investors and there are shareholders. And what CoStar has decided to do is basically refreshed its board and is basically going to have a strategic review of the entire business. And obviously a part of that is going to be Homes.com, and they want to work out when it's going to be profitable. They want to communicate to shareholders. They want to communicate to the market that this is something that's going to turn into a profitable venture in, X amount of years, for example. That's the basics, Ed.
Yeah, what was
A bit of a
interesting.
sidetrack there, but that's what we need to know. Residential revenue's pretty strong at the moment. We've got 2024 Q4 residential revenues of 28.1 million. That's a historical high. So residential revenue is doing well for CoStar, but Homes.com, is it profitable yet?
Yeah, so what was interesting about this was that they specifically mentioned Homes.com in the language used in the press release, and people have been, talking about that's quite interesting. What was interesting previously on CoStar's quarterly missives to the market was that if you actually read the call with investors that they do, like Andy Florence and the CFO, they have mentioned or they have had questions from the investors about how's Homes.com doing, how and one thing that they said on there, or I think Andy Florence said, was that maybe the sales at Homes.com hadn't been going as well as they'd hoped. And he put it down to, well, actually, we borrowed a whole load of salespeople from other departments of CoStar to sell the Homes.com product. And maybe maybe it didn't go great initially because of that. And what they said was, on the latest investor call, we're going to scale the specific Homes.com sales team to, I think it's 500 people just selling what Homes.com is doing, which admittedly is something very new and something that US agents aren't used to. So it was kind of an interesting, maybe not an admission in as many words, but it was interesting that they named Homes.com as one of the targets for this kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, strategic overhaul. I'm not sure what the exact language was used.
Yeah, my thought is the following: is that that the market, from an investor perspective, is perpetually impatient. They always want to have results yesterday. And what the CoStar team or the Homes.com team are doing is trying to rebuild a business, take the Homes.com brand from a distant number 3 or 4 or whatever it was, make it in a number 2 at least, maybe even number 1 over time with consumers, and then to build a different sort of go-to-market model around it. That takes time, and people just have to be patient in that process. And the thing is, when you're out there marketing a lot, saying, hey, here's come to homes.com and so on, there's that inherently builds a degree of impatience. People think, oh, wow, things must be going so fast. And what they're doing is all the right stuff. Build the brand. I mean, if you think about, I used to teach a course at a conferences, run a workshop, right? All about how to build a property portal. And it's all about get the listings, build demand, drive leads, then worry about monetization. And that's what they're doing. They're following the playbook. Not my playbook. That's the most obvious playbook out there. Problem is everyone is very impatient around it. But I always reflect on the following: as if you took me back in time to 2001 or 2, we weren't thinking about REA Group as a $35 billion business. We were thinking about how the hell do we keep the lights on and how do we just grow the number of agents in the market using the product. It's all we cared about. Okay? And we thought over time the results will deliver themselves if we execute well. So I would just say be patient.
Could I ask you a question there, Simon?
No.
Well, I'm going to ask it anyway. So, in the
okay. Do I have to answer?
You don't have to answer. I'll give you that.
Then.
I'll give you that.
I like freedom.
So we're in the statement they're talking about capital allocation strategy. So how much money are we investing into the business, and what kind of return is going into that?
Yep.
What on earth does a capital allocation strategy look like, and how do I know whether it's going to, turn into shareholder return in 5-10 years?
Sure. So you got to think about a couple of things. One is, how are these businesses valued in the market, and what does a successful business look like over time? So we've got some good proxies out there. You look at Zillow, you look at how it's valued in the market, a multiple of revenue, it's break even, and so on, or whatever. And so it gives you an idea of what the size of the prize is for the homes.com business. Now the question is, how big can homes.com realistically become from both from all the KPIs? And KPIs are not just financial, but non-financial as well. Leads generated, people visiting the site, number of agents using the site, number of products purchased through whatever, ... plus revenues. And of course, expenses. Then you say, well, how much money can I achieve that outcome? And if so, how much do I have to invest to get to that outcome? And through that allocation, so how much capital am I going to allocate from CoStar as a whole to that project? Okay, because that's building homes.com as a business unit. It's a project, right, that you're doing, and it's X, whatever X is, right? And and then where you're going to invest it. I'm going to invest it on marketing to build awareness and Super Bowl ads and whatever, all the TV ads and so on. Am I going to invest in the team? So these 500 people, that's another capital investment that you're making, and so on. They're all just investments, because it's, at the end of the day, you're applying capital to the problem, cash to the problem. That until you become cash flow positive from that part of the business, you're allocating capital. You got to fund it. So that's what that's clearly what they'll be looking at is, am I allocating the right amount of money, and am I getting the right return from that investment? So am I growing fast enough? Am I getting the right number? Yeah. Am I getting a good return on investment for the amount of money spent on marketing? Am I getting a good return on investment for building out a sales team? Are they selling are they selling 5 products per person per week to agents? I don't know what the metrics are around it. That's what you'll be looking at as a capital allocation team. And that's what whoever's, the data, whoever runs homes.com from a day-to-day perspective will be looking at. And all those metrics are going hopefully from, what we say, from bottom left to top right. Think of a chart, growth. Bottom left, top right. You're growing. As long as they're all growing in the right direction. And if you do the maths around it, then at some point in time, you go from the losses reduce. Then you become profitable. No more cash needs to be injected. So no more capital needs to be allocated from a CoStar perspective to that business. And then it'll then start to be returning capital in the form of, I don't know how they've corporately structured this, but be returning money to the overall CoStar business. That's what it's all
All
about.
right.
That's all it's about.
All right, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, Immobiliare.it, who we've spoken about a bit recently in the context of Spain. We're talking about them today in the context of Croatia, which is, to my mind at least, a market that they already dominated before the news of the last kind of week, 10 days. Harvey, do you want to fill us in about Immobiliare and what they've been doing in Croatia?
Yeah, absolutely. So a brief bit of context. Obviously, Immobiliare, one of the market leaders in Italy, already had a foothold in Croatia, as you say, Ed. Already had a foothold in Spain, where it has increased its foothold recently by agreeing to acquire Pisos.com from Grupo Vicento. So it looks like an international expansion is underway for Immobiliare, maybe a bit of consolidation in both of these markets as well. You're right; they are already in Croatia, and I can read it here. The new portal is Necret9. Whatever. No idea if that's the pronunciation, but we'll go with it. Necret9. The portal already has 150,000 listings, 600 agents using the service, and there are already brands in Croatia under the Immobiliare umbrella, as you said, Ed, which are Crozilla and Indomia,
Yeah,
which
thanks.
also operates in Spain, I think, correct?
Yeah.
And the CEO, Silvio Pagliani, said it's going to be a leading brand in our group in Croatia, enabling us to provide an even better service to professionals in the sector and all those looking for a home.
Thanks, Harvey. I'm curious about this one. I'm not really sure I understand it. So Immobiliare.it, or the company behind it, already owned what was the leading vertical in Croatia, Crozilla.com. And as far as I can establish on SimilarWeb, the number two, which was Indomio, which Indomio is like a brand that they use across most of their markets, right? Why are they now launching a third brand? I understand, as I understand it, Nekretnin, or whatever it's called, it means like homes. So they've essentially got a really good domain name there, and it works. So that same domain name is the leading portal over the border in Slovenia. But why do you need three brands? Simon, you probably know better than most what they're doing here. Why would you launch a third portal?
So they've acquired have they launched it or acquired it?
They launched it. They didn't acquire it. It's just a new.
Right. So
I think they're just trying to consolidate brands, maybe, which is something that portal groups don't usually do. They usually like to stick with.
Yeah, but go back in time. Immobiliare in Italy was not called Immobiliare. It was called Endeca Casa. Right. Okay. If you go back, Endeca Casa, something like that. Anyway, back in 2007, 8, 9, whenever they sort of launched. So you've got to be aware that people changing brands is not unknown, and
But it's
clearly,
rare. It tends not to happen. Is my point. Like normally when
yeah,
one portal buys another one, they keep the same brand because of SEO reasons. It's usually quite rare.
yeah,
My
but
point.
what they've clearly got is if this is a good brand, and I don't speak Croatian, so I got no idea. But if this is a very logical brand to have and allows you to consolidate under one roof, a brand that may be not really obvious. Okay. So one thing is homes.com. We'll take the US example we were, right? Homes.com. Oh, I understand what that means. I just know the URL naturally. Realestate.com. Okay. They're obvious brands. Zillow, if I just launch Zillow, I've got no idea what the hell that is, right? I've got to build a brand around it. And my marketing, therefore, is actually a higher level of spend needed. So you then think, well, if I've already got a couple of brands in a market, I've got Indomio. Well, if Indomio probably means nothing in Croatian, right? It's just a random name. And the other one, I've got no idea what it is.
Crozilla, yeah, again.
Crozilla doesn't sound like it has any name. It's just Croatia and Zilla merged together like Godzilla. Okay. Right. So why not? And I've now got hold of a brand that means real estate or homes or something in the native language. Sure. Migrate in that direction. You start a third site. You make sure all the content's there. You then progressively move your marketing to that brand. Okay. And then that becomes the dominant ingrained brand. And in 10 years' time, that's what people just naturally think of. I don't have to be educated what a Crowzilla is or a Indomio is. I just know, oh, homes.com. Yeah, that's obvious, right? I go there. In fact, if I'm going to type something, I might randomly type homes.com. So I think, yeah, it makes sense to do it. If you get the brand, rebrand.
Okay,
And that's
fair enough.
and Croatia's not, it's not like it's, you know, a major chunk of the overall Immobiliare network, right? It's, you know, they've now got Pisos, they've now got Indomio in Spain, right? They've got Immobiliare in Italy, they've got Spitigados in Greece, okay, and so on. So my guess is they've done some work around brand, yeah, what do they call it? Unprompted and prompted brand awareness in the Croatian market, and they're probably rated low. And they've gone, well, we're market leaders. It doesn't matter, right? But if you go to England and you do, you know, tell me a property portal, they're going to go right move because it's 25 years of brand building. You're not going to change that brand in a heartbeat. But aren't they going to change on the market in the United Kingdom to homes.co.uk? Remember that was talked about at the conference? It was
We're
hinted at.
still waiting. We're still
Definitely
waiting.
no comment from me. I don't need to upset CoStar's.
I don't know. I don't know. But but at the conference we had in Barcelona, that was talked about. Okay, so my view is that, you know, on the market versus homes probably is a better brand overall to say what you're doing. So I don't see a problem with what Immobiliare is doing, and I think, you know, Silvio's probably making a smart, rational decision. Okay, if the one thing I know about Silvio, he's a very good operator, right, and has been for a very long time.
Makes sense. It sounds to me like it's a little bit of a punt, and if it goes well, it's a really nice punt, and if it doesn't, then we still got the market leading brand.
It's
It
not
says
even
here
a punt.
it
How's
says
it
in
a
our
punt?
coverage that it's powered by the Immobiliare technology, Necrotnine, however we're pronouncing it. So they know that it's something that is going to work functionally. As you
It is a
say,
punt. I think it's something very logical to do. Get on with it, right?
good luck.
And then
Best of luck.
you can have all three brands in the market. They're probably going to all carry the same content at the end of the day. They're just going to have three ways in which people can look at the same content, probably have different user experiences over time, and they'll put all their marketing money behind one of the brands, which will be the new one. Yep.
Okay, we'll move on.
Jigsaw
That was
round.
actually a good explanation. That yeah, in my mind, that's kind of cleared it up. We'll move on to our last item on the agenda, which is an interesting news story that came out of Russia. This is from DomClick. Why don't you fill us in on this kind of dystopian news item, Harvey?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So, DomClick are like one of the most active companies that we cover at online marketplaces. There's a press release from a new product or service pretty much every week from them. They feature in our product roundup quite a lot, but this one is a little bit more off-piste, shall we say, and potentially even controversial. So, DomClick is going to allow buyers to see anonymized data about who's living in the building that they're looking to buy a property in. So, what's their age? What's the shoe size? How many dogs do they have? And obviously, the residents are rightly going to kick up a fuss, right? I don't want someone who's moving into my building to know how old I am, whether I'm white, black, or Asian, male, female, age 30 to 40 or 40 to 50. So, yes, anonymized data, but nevertheless, it does seem like maybe one level of data too far for some people, and that's where the debate arises. Hey, Ed?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning as well. They're owned by Sberbank, which is, I think, the biggest bank in Russia, which is where they're getting all this data from.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, so I think to clarify, I think it's not shoe size. It's like if you own a car, it's your demographics, it's whether you own a dog and whether you have children. Which, like, normally I would be a big advocate of, yes, put more data on real estate portals. Don't think I like this one. Simon, where do you fall on this?
I think this is a generational issue, first of all, no one has any private information anymore, so we all have to get used to it. Our information is absolutely everywhere all the time on the internet, so that's the reality of life. Second, Sberbank is yes, it's the largest bank in Russia, and 50% of all mortgages in Russia go through Sberbank. So DomClick is more about a lead generation service for Sberbank than it is as a separate functioning portal. Okay, so keep that in mind. Third is we're always talking about, providing more information to the consumer so they can make a more informed decision. Now, if I'm going to buy an apartment, and I'm in an apartment at the moment, and I actually don't know how many are in. I've been here for 12 years, and I don't know. There's probably about 50 apartments, maybe a bit less, 40 apartments. I can honestly say I don't know much about everyone living here, but I do know that there's a bunch of dogs, and I do know that there are a bunch of kids. Now, if I'm 70 years old and I'm moving into a new apartment and I don't like a bunch of dogs and a bunch of kids, I think that's a fair bit of that's fair to know. What's the general characteristics of the people who live in the apartment block? I think that's fair, because we if you think about it, often if you go into some places around the world and you go to live in an apartment or buy an apartment somewhere, you have to go through a committee to be allowed to buy an apartment there, where you're actually getting vetted, and they want to know everything about you before they let you in. Do you have a criminal record? Do you have pets? Do you have this, that, and the other thing? So what I think they're doing here is actually not unreasonable, right? They're not saying Harvey lives in apartment 10. He has 2 cats and a girlfriend, and I don't know, and he works from home, right? And oh, by the way, he likes heavy metal music and plays that between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. every morning. They're not doing that level of information, but they are saying, oh, there are 30 apartments in here. 80% are owned by families. Well, that's probably a nice thing to know before I bought the apartment.
I'm kind of with Simon on this one. I'm actually all right with it. I think the fact that it's anonymized. I mean, obviously, that's always going to be a key differentiator. If it's not anonymous, then we are in trouble. But I would be fine with having my data anonymized and shared if I got to see other people's anonymized data for a place that I'm willing to look. That's sort of where I am, Ed. But I mean, you're still rolling your eyes, so go on, give me your rebuttal.
I don't know. What I would say is I think you could get away with this in Russia. I don't think you could get away with this in the United States. I think people would have something to say about it.
I disagree. I think there's so much data floating around. If you go and look at homes, I was looking at homes.com the other day and I have a property in the US, and I was having a look at and the amount of data that they're sharing about my house.
But it's your house, not about you.
Yeah, but it tells you exactly how much I paid for it. It tells you if I've got a loan against it. That's a bit more personal than the fact that I exist.
Yeah,
that's a bit
if
more
you've got
personal.
A loan against it, it's quite.
It tells you mortgage. It tells you everything, right? It tells everything about it. So that people know exactly how much I spent. They know exactly how much it's worth today. You can then do, far more about me than if I happen to be a 58-year-old white male with I don't know, a dog and a family living at this house, right? Right. And by the way, I'm not going to tell you that it's in that house. I'm just going to say it's in this suburb. So I've got zero problem with that. I've got far more of a problem with the fact that people know how much I paid for the house. That's a
I
different
might go and
issue,
have a
right?
look after this. No,
Yeah.
I don't know the address.
But the whole thing is that there's so much information out there about you and about a house and a property that people can extrapolate quite easily. And if you're going to buy something and you're going to make your largest investment in life about something, that the more information you can have to make that decision, the better off you are going to be, right? Because you're making a very informed decision about it. So, you would like to know, for example, if there's a new development happening next door to you, wouldn't you? You would like to know if that new development's going to be a house or going to be a block of apartments. You'd like to know if that's going to block your view, right? These are all information that you want to know so that you can make an informed decision. Now, if you're moving into an apartment block, you want to know, well, who else is living in here? Right? Because I need to be able to be comfortable that I'm going to be happy. It's not like I buy a car, I don't like driving it, and I can sell it 3 weeks later and I'll lose a little bit of money, but I'll get on with life. This is a big decision. So I've just brought up here, okay, all the information about the house, my house, right? I can tell you who owns it at the moment, so it has my company name. I happen to buy it through a company. I can tell you the guy who owned it before me, and he owned it for 2 years and 6 months, and it was a private individual. I've now got his name, right? I can now go Google him. Okay. By the way, you can go and look at this. Anyone can look at this. I can tell you the house value. I can tell you the amount that I paid for it because it's sitting in there. I can tell you the value of all the other houses in the market. That's far more private information if you think about it than the fact that there's a bunch of families and kids and dogs and whatever. Okay. I can tell you the purchase history. I can tell you the mortgage history. I can tell you that the previous owner had a $600,000 mortgage against the house. I've got his name. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So
Could
there
I
you
add
go.
one little thing there?
Etc. Blah blah blah. I can tell you if the taxes have been paid. All right.
So
On the
I
house and how
remember
much?
we did a story last year, Ed, where there were a bunch of GPTs, AIs that somehow got, I can't remember exactly what happened, but they got rolled back pretty soon after being launched because they were giving discriminatory search results. Because what happened in the US was that because these GPTs were giving away information that was technically neutral information, i.e., the demographics of a neighborhood, whether they were mostly Hispanic, white, or black, for example, that people could actually start making discriminatory buying decisions. So it just reminded me of that. Worth keeping in mind that this anonymized data could be somehow weaponized if it's in the wrong hands. But generally,
Yeah.
I think this is
I think that's
a safer version
no.
than what happened in the US. Personally,
By the way, I can now tell you that the average household income in my suburb is $221,848. The median age of people is 42. 8% are renters. 80% are college graduates. Well, isn't that starting to get to the same level of information?
it sounds like a
And
nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
And there's 360 houses in this neighborhood. Okay, I can tell you that much. But what's the difference between 360 houses in a neighborhood, so it's spread over this way, versus an apartment block going this way with 100 apartments?
Okay. No, I don't think we're going to get anywhere on this debate. I think I'm feeling a bit scared of AI this week for a few reasons. One of which is I read a book which kind of really scared me about it. Anyway, guys, we'll leave it there because this is an endless debate. We're going to go down a rabbit hole. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Ciao.
Thanks.